panel session is focusing on building great institutions of learning. And during this next hour, we have our university leaders discussing trends in higher education and how these premier institutions will adapt for tomorrow's challenges. And I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Leila Hoteit,
yes,
who will be assuming the moderator role, which I think is a pretty challenging one. And at that point, I would let Dr. Leila Hoteit introduce the panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe before introducing the panel members, just to set the stage, first of all, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. So we're living a very dynamic moment in the space of higher education, and a moment where traditional higher education, the residential campus, the students between 18 and 22 is meeting many new models of higher education. These new models obviously include online courses, massive open online courses, but they also include elite universities deciding to have global campuses. They include very strong partnerships that are being forged between a large number of institutions, sometimes also companies, to ensure that the students are getting the 21st century higher education. The students are catching up with this. So according to a study by BCG from last year, in the US, 30% of students in higher education today are actually taking a course that has an online component, and 16% are purely online already. Anant's edX, I know, has students registered or enrolled from over 200 countries. So students are catching up. But it's still early days, and there are still lots of challenges. So what I'd like to discuss today with these great speakers is, what are these challenges? What is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the leader to ensure that we get to the right place for higher education? So I'm thrilled today to have with me on the panel 4 great leaders of such institutions, all of whom have been engaged on both the traditional and the more modern new ways of learning, so as to discuss this very interesting, very exciting topic. So to start the introduction, Professor Bin Yang, you're the Vice President, Provost, and Director of the Graduate School Tsinghua. Did I pronounce it correctly? Tsinghua, sorry. Professor Anant Agarwal, you are a professor at MIT, but also the CEO of edX. Professor James Ryan, the Dean for Harvard University Graduate School of Education. And Professor Lance de Masi, the President for the American University of Dubai. So maybe if we can start the panel with a bit of an exciting question. People are now saying great traditional institutions are now a thing of the past. They're seen as impersonal, faceless, and maybe the new, cheaper ways of learning are a better alternative. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? Maybe we can start with Professor Bin.
Sure. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here and to discuss about the new educational model and the traditional ones. Actually, I'm not agree with that comment about the traditional great institutions are impersonal or faceless or something like that, because actually lots of great institutions, they are not only just the course deliver platform or some knowledge delivery machine. They are providing lots of other things rather than knowledge delivery. Like Tsinghua University, we provide very vivid, I think, learning ecosystem. Not only the course, but also so many extracurricular activities. Faculty members and students, they work together to explore so many opportunities to design and find new things. Yeah. So for the online courses, I think it really challenged the traditional knowledge delivery model. Like Tsinghua, I teach a course moral reasoning and kind of political philosophy course at Tsinghua University. I think nowadays I'm not competing with the professors in the same department with me or the neighbor university in China, but compete with Michael Sandel, who teach the same course in Harvard. Right? I have to assume the students who participate in my class discussion already watched the TV or the video clips justice. Mm-hmm. So I think more and more pressure on the faculty members now mm-hmm. to not do the very simple knowledge delivery thing, but back to kind of chalk and talk. Mm-hmm. You have to engage all the students to actively discuss the real things,
excellent.
Real challenges, and the real problems we are facing now.
Very good. So very interesting in terms of the positive pressure that it's putting on the traditional higher education. Professor Anant, what do you think? Is traditional education a thing of the past?
I would tweak the question slightly. First of all, I completely agree with all that my esteemed colleague from Tsinghua and an edX partner has indicated. Yeah. The way I would like to reframe the question is not so much that our universities are a thing of the past, that if universities are not innovative and not looking to bring in new technologies, new modalities, new pedagogies into education, then they will become a thing of the past. I think we are in a critical juncture of our education history. Although education hasn't changed in hundreds of years, I think this is a time when many forces are coming together. And if universities and university leaders and university systems and professors and all of us do not really rethink how we teach on campus, rethink what the campus is about, I think we will become a thing of the past. So for example, if you look at AT&T, AT&T was about 30 years ago when I first came to the US, you got everything to AT&T. You got this pink telephone, you got a service plan, 411 information, everything was through AT&T. But because of innovation, the whole system unbundled. The best people delivered great phones. AT&T got into the business of long distance data transmission, and we got others carrying the 411 calls. I think similarly, universities need to think about what are they really good for, and is it content delivery, or is it working with a professor on research? Is it about is it about a good admission system? I think universities should really think about what are the areas in which they should excel and innovate, and not try to do everything.
Very good. Professor Ryan, maybe we can focus on that question actually as a sub-question. What do you think the traditional institutions need to focus on so as to survive?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question, which leads to the second. I don't think that traditional universities, especially the top ones, are a thing of the past. And all you need to do, at least in the US, is look at applications. This is admissions season at US universities, so a lot of attention is being paid on application numbers, and they're skyrocketing, and students and parents are clamoring to get into these universities. So the question is, well, what are they offering, really, aside from content delivery, which could easily be captured online? And I think the very best ones are the exact opposite of being faceless and nameless, and they provide a sense of community among faculty and students. There's an awful lot of learning that happens outside of the classroom among peers. Mm-hmm. They also offer support for students who are either struggling or unsure about where to go, and they offer a credential and some measure of prestige. And that in turn provides lessons for online learning, if you think about it. The most successful online experiences, I think, also create a sense of community among those who are participating. They provide some level of support to those who are participating, mm-hmm. and they provide and they provide some kind of credential. At the same time, I think, to Anant's point, he's exactly right that the prevalence and proliferation of online education is also putting pressure on and forcing universities, traditional elite universities, to rethink how they do things. And instead of, at least at the top level, instead of thinking of online education as substituting or making irrelevant residential education, I think they're going to change it quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And you're already starting to see this around campuses, including my own. What happens in a lecture hall, what happens in a classroom is often different now because of the availability of online learning. And so I think it's an incredibly, it's a fraught time and a time of anxiety in a lot of institutions, but I also think it's an incredibly exciting time, because the models of learning that are available through online are actually encouraging, if not forcing, faculty at schools across the country and across the globe to rethink what they're doing on campus.
Very good. Professor de Masi?
Yeah, I have the advantage of being last, so I can simply say I agree with everything that's been said.
Or not.
And the fact is that I do agree with everything that has been said. I'll put a slightly different spin on it. Perhaps with origins from my own personal academic discipline, and that is that great universities are great brands, and great brands are neither faceless nor impersonal. And great brands, if they adapt, survive and remain great. I think it's important to understand that this greatness is derived from the value that the university adds to people's lives, to the members of its constituencies, students, of course, and faculty as well. And if the university adds that value, then we can say that it is effective. And so I don't think that the question is about whether it's faceless or what have you. I think the question is about the effectiveness. And it's obvious that to remain effective, to go beyond its current status of effectiveness, because the traditional model has been effective. It has been. It hasn't been effective for everybody, and that's one of its drawbacks. It's also tried to offer the same thing to everybody, and that's not what everybody wants or needs. But to build on that history of effectiveness, it's going to have to adapt, and it is going to have to change. And I don't think that the words that were used in the question, such as cheap and what have you, I don't think that those are the variables that are going to be the metrics for its for measurement of its success or of its effectiveness. I think that probably more than ever before, employment readiness by graduates is going to become the metric in terms, particularly of undergraduate education, by which institutions are judged. But I'll say more about that later.
Very good. So that's a very good point. Should employment readiness be the only metric? And let me just talk about something specific. So what about the social skills of children or of students as they learn? How does online affect that? So Anant, do you want to address that question?
Sure. One of the things to think about in times of transformation and disruption, the basis upon which we make judgments also change. So the question was, do online learning and similar kinds of approaches to teaching, are they doing away with how do you teach the typical forms of human interaction, human skills, social skills? Now you could look at it in two ways. One way to look at it is the way people interact socially is changing over time. And so, before textbooks and books, it was verbal communication. Once people learned how to communicate and by writing letters and transmitting letters and so on effectively, writing skills became important. today, our kids are born digital. You know, I like to say that, you know, my, my son, when you ask him a question, you know, it responds in two ways. One is silence or a grunt. So it's like 0 and a 1. I call it digital. You know, it's like a new form of English. And I call this teenish. It's got like 2 syllables. And so in this new age, in this whole digital native age where our teenagers are so conversant with digital technologies, I think we need to teach a whole new set of social skills. How do you communicate over email? Some of the biggest blunders that our teenagers make today are, you know, when you send a thoughtless email, what you post on Facebook and social, there's a whole new culture that we have to teach. And so I think even our norms and understanding of what is social and social skills also has to change. And we need to teach those as well. And in fact, the biggest mistakes people make are, you know, a lot of people make rules that they shall not send emails after 10 o'clock. And you know, by the time you wake up in the morning, you say, I wish I hadn't sent that email. I mean, all of us have had this, you know, this epiphany in the morning. So I think our concept of social also changes, and I think we need to create both, teach students not just normal social skills, but also digital social skills.
Very good. Anybody else wants to address that point as well?
Yeah. Actually, I think especially for the Chinese young people, online learning provides kind of a, you know, provocative way for them to be more outspoken. Usually, when students discuss some sensitive issues like some moral standing, Chinese people will, you know, will be very hesitant to speak out their own voices. But, you know, through the online vehicles, people can express their real thinking, thoughts, standing more bravely. That's a kind of a digital, I think, social skills, maybe, yeah.
Very good.
So just picking up on that, you know, when I think of online learning and social relationships and participation and the like, there's often a debate of whether it's better or worse. And I think the general belief, which I think is misguided, is that it's worse. I think it's different. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. It's better in the ways just described, in that it is often the case that in an online discussion you will have more and more diverse participation than you will in an in-person class, because there are some who are shy to speak up in front of a crowd, whereas if they're participating online, they're freer to participate. And I think that's a good thing. The other is that, going back to the point about communities, it's clear that online communities can and are created in the context of classes, and that they can be quite strong. That's at every level, from K through 12 up through higher education. And so it's, I think, inaccurate to think that online education is somehow going to prevent the creation of social bonds and membership in a community. That said, there's something ineffable, even if difficult to measure, about face-to-face interaction. I mean, there's a reason we all came to Dubai rather than sat at home in our living rooms and Skyped in. Because there's something about human interaction, face-to-face interaction, that is difficult to replicate. And so I think the best way to think about it is you can have different kinds of communities online, but they will never completely substitute for the real thing. And I'll just give you one example that I think captures this really well. A colleague of mine, Chris Deedy, who's an expert in learning technologies, teaches a course on emerging technologies and their potential to transform education. And he practices what he preaches. And so students are encouraged, if they wish, to engage in simultaneous discussion with one another while the lecture is going on, which is remarkable if you think about it, because I was a law professor before I became a dean, and I always saw the computers open as something I had to compete with.
Mm-hmm.
But he invites the students to have chats with each other if they wish, and about a third of them do. Then they have an asynchronous discussion, so there's a discussion thread that goes on outside of the class, and then they obviously have the class. And he surveyed the students, and they say, they would absolutely not want the online discussion to be taken away, but they would not want the course to be entirely online, which I think kind of captures
I think that's very
both
interesting
points.
because you see the same thing, the same findings in K-12 actually, that there was a lot of push first for online, and then now a lot of people are saying that the best way is blended. You
Right.
need to find the best of both and blend them together. So very important point, we talked about how learning is changing. What about the role of the teacher? How does that have to change in higher education to meet the new challenges, the new model? Who wants to volunteer first?
Well, I think the teacher remains a star, but remains a very different kind of star, or a star for different reasons. And we're talking about higher education. The stardom traditionally has derived, and this is still very much alive and well, by expertise in the discipline. And the expression of that expertise through the creation of knowledge, which is of course scholarship and creative activity. I think that is what is changing and will have to change as part of the adaptation. It's not going to be so much, it isn't so much, I don't think, about teaching in the traditional sense of walking in, speaking, people absorbing, and then possibly spit it back. It's not that. It's about learning. So you have to look at it totally from the learning perspective as opposed to from the teaching perspective. Now, if we look at it from that perspective, the whole educational experience, and this is why I find the fusion between online and in situ to be so exciting and to present us with so many opportunities. And that is because I think that the outside the classroom experience, which allows students to obtain information, to explore, to do what was traditionally done in the classroom with the lecturer. You do that outside the classroom, and then when you come together, whether it be in situ or online, then that professor, as a facilitator, as a guider, as someone who inspires. You know, John Gardner talks about the 5 minds of the future. Well, I think that professor in that classroom is the one that appeals to the mind that integrates, appeals to the mind that becomes expert in something, the mind that is ethical, et cetera, et cetera. So the connections can be made through the classroom experience. And that isn't done through lecturing. That's done through troubleshooting, that's done through challenging, that's done through structured learning exercises, that's done through students teaching other students, that's done through individualized instruction, not believing that all of those people that you have in front of you are the same and will learn in the same way, are in need of the same things. And it's done in terms of empowering the student to learn, to control, if you will, to be in control of their own education.
Excellent. James?
Well, it's my turn to agree. I do think that online education...
I would like some of you to disagree.
Okay.
No, he's from Harvard, he can agree.
This one I'll agree with. I especially agree with the idea that what online teaching is doing is forcing all of us to think about learning. And it's giving us the opportunity to understand how students learn because we now have all this data about how students learn. So here's something very basic. Students tune out quite quickly. So I think the average drop off is precipitous around the 6, 7, 8 minute mark. Well, if you think about most lectures, they're about 45 minutes long, which means that if you're lecturing for 45 minutes, after about 10 minutes, you've lost most of the class. So if you're teaching an online course, what do? Well, what you do is you pause. It's 6 or 7 minutes, and you provide some opportunity for questions in order to allow the learner to assess whether he or she picked up what was needed to be picked up. It also, if you think about it, and this picks up on the earlier point, it forces faculty to think about how should they best use their classroom time, that is time when they are physically present with their students. The more our students are exposed as K through 12 students to online learning, the more they're exposed to the ability to pick up information online, the less tolerant they're going to be of having to be at a particular place at a particular time to listen to someone stand up and give a lecture that could have been recorded and could have been watched at 1 a.m. in their dorm rooms. So they're going to expect and demand that the classroom time be used for something that they couldn't actually do online, which means that it must be discussion-based, it must be project-based, there must be opportunities for interaction, there must be opportunities for students to learn from one another. And I think that means that teaching is going to become a lot more complex than it has been at the higher education level, but I also think a lot more interesting.
Excellent. Anant?
I think if you look at the role of the teacher over history, it's kept changing. So, if you've read ancient epics like the Mahabharata or the Ramayana from India and similar epics all over the world, from 2,000–3,000 years ago, it was the sage who was the teacher, and the students would live with the sage, and the sage would have 3 or 4 students, and he would take care of all their needs. He would have everything memorized. There were no textbooks, and they would recite long poems. I'm really impressed how they could do that. I lose after 4 or 5 words, but they had to remember a lot of things, and they had to be physical instructors. They would have to teach them archery, and from there, as time went on, teachers did fewer and different things. So particularly after textbooks came out, teachers did not have to memorize things anymore. Now I could use a textbook, and then I could work with the student and explain concepts to them and so on, and use the textbook as a guide. Today things have changed even more. With online education, it's not just the textbook that's available, but an entire course is available. So there's videos. You can watch professors and teachers from all over the world teach the material. It's not just in a textbook. You can watch people teach it and maybe even dramatize it and act it and actually see the real artifacts as opposed to seeing just pictures. You can also get problem sets and exercises. You don't have to create new problem sets. So when more and more of this stuff is available readily to the students, when they want it, they can pause the video, they can rewind the video. So how did the role of the teacher change in this new age? Frankly, the teacher becomes, from being an expert in providing the content, the teacher can become much more of an expert in helping the students learn. And so that role has kept changing, and today, particularly with full courses being available online, the teacher's role is much more the guide on the side kind of thing, which says, look, how do we learn? Helping the students to use analytical thinking and to learn from the material and not necessarily have to be a fount of content and knowing all the material themselves. So I think if there's one key word that has described how the role of the teacher changes over time, it's what I would call unbundling. So 3,000 years ago, everything was bundled into one teacher. Had to be a fount of knowledge, physical instruction, a cook, chief bottle washer. The teacher, the sage, did everything with 3 or 4 students. But things kept getting more and more unbundled. And today, in fact, when people team teach a course, some professors love to lecture. I have colleagues that don't like to lecture, but are phenomenal at writing problem sets. So in the MOOC that my colleagues and I created on edX, I did some of the video lectures with handwriting, and with 6–7 minute videos. My colleague, Professor Jerry Sussman, he loves creating really creative problem sets. So he did all the problem sets. Chris Terman, who's another professor at MIT, he loves animation, so he built a simulator to show students how to interact with the content. Piero Mitros, he loves creating engaging interactives for the students, and so he would dramatize problem solving. So the whole thing was unbundled, where different people focused on things that they really cared about and brought all these things together in one experience. So I think the key word for the evolution of teachers will be unbundling. You will do what you really enjoy doing, and then you will outsource the rest to online or work with colleagues to pull the whole experience together.
Okay. I want to hear from Bin, but then I will come back to you, Anant. I want to ask you, what do you think online cannot do? Because I'd love to see your thinking of that. So Ben, maybe we come back, we stay at the previous question, which is the role of the teacher. How do you see that?
I think three challenges for today's teacher are very obvious. The first one is the teachers, they have to be more comfortable with informal communication. Usually, in the past, they can be some role of sent on the stage. Mm-hmm. But now they have to, communicate like Anant just mentioned, like just friendly, informal way, and that helps students to innovate. More flat culture helps innovation happen. The second one is the teachers. They have to be more like a learner. They have to be more, open-minded to learn from the students. And third one is they have to know more about local things. If you can learn some universal content from star professors at Harvard or MIT, you have to know local details. Then you can share with your students and gain their respect. So three specific challenges.
Very good. So we'll come back to that question. What do you think online cannot do? What's beyond the realm of online?
You're a smart one. You turned the question on me. So, see, I'm an engineer. And it's always dangerous to pose a challenge to an engineer, because we like solving problems. And frankly, even in the 3 years that we founded edX, there's been a number of things that 3 years ago I said couldn't be done. And people who are much smarter than I am, when I pose those challenges to them, people much smarter than I am crack those problems, and we have solutions to those. So it's very dangerous to tell a technologist, this thing cannot be done by technology. I'll give you an example. I'm not answering your question, but I will get to it. So one example was, you'll never be able to grade essays. I said, oh yeah, that's one thing. Online learning, we won't be able to grade essays. Humans have to do that. And then I met Vic Paruchuri. Vic Paruchuri, he won the Hewlett Foundation's major contest on using AI technology to grade essays. We hired him. And so now we have prototype technology at edX where we can use machine learning to be a machine learning model to be trained. So professor grades the first 100 essays against a rubric, and that trains a machine learning model. And then 101 onwards, the computer can grade. So Vic proved that I was wrong. And you can read a blog post by Professor Bonovac, a philosophy professor at UT Austin, where he talks about being a skeptic, but when he used the AI grader on edX, he found that it did really well. So never say never with technology. However, there are some things that I think is going to be really, really hard to do. So, when you're studying, I love to eat pizza. And I can't imagine the computer delivering pizza to me. Online can't get me pizza. So that's going to be tough. The second one is, if you look at laboratories, we can do all kinds of laboratories online today. In physics, we can do all kinds of simulation-based laboratories, and I call it better than real life. We can do biological simulations, chemistry simulations. The one thing that is hard is how do you recreate smell? So until you smelt hydrogen sulfide, H2S, you don't get to appreciate chemistry. Now even there, I believe I will be proved wrong, because I can dream of a little USB stick that I stick into my little laptop. And with the right signal, it can produce the smell of H2S. So really, I mean, I can't imagine the short of delivering pizza, given enough time and given enough smartness of people around me, I think technology can solve many problems.
So I will finally disagree just a little.
We got there.
And if Anant takes the engineer's perspective, maybe just to play devil's advocate, I'll take what you might call a poet's perspective. Although I'm not a poet, I was trained as a lawyer, so I'm sort of the opposite of a poet. But anyway, stick with me. I think that it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for online education to replicate the sense of spark and spontaneity that comes from in-presence education. And I know that's hard to quantify, but to give you an example, we've had an ongoing experiment in an analogous situation where it's perfectly easy for you to follow all the action, see all the stars, understand the scores, just by sitting at home and watching sports on television. And yet, soccer, football, baseball, and basketball stadiums are still full. Why is that?
Pizza. Popcorn. Hot dogs.
It's easier to get pizza delivered at home than it is to the stadium. I think what there is about it is there's something irreplaceable about being there to witness that is analogous to what it's like to be in a classroom with others. Now, as technology improves, and this is, I think, what Anant would say, that sense of interaction will just get better and better, right? And you'll be able to see others who are in the classroom, and it'll come more and more to replicate the experience. But again, I go back to sports. It's now possible to have a 112-inch television screen, high definition, in your living room. So it is as close to being there as you can imagine, and yet people still go to the stadium because there's something that's difficult to replace.
You know, can I disagree with my colleague's disagreement very briefly? So, you know, David Pritchard, a professor of physics at MIT, likes to say that when you're teaching a class, and once you are beyond the fourth row in the class, it's distance education. And frankly, for me, I've gone to football stadiums, I've gone to cricket stadiums, and I've watched various kinds of sports. And unless you're sitting in the front row, I don't enjoy it. In a football, the seats way up there are called nosebleed seats. It's so high, you know, where you choke because there's not enough oxygen up there. You can barely see what's going on. And to me, unless there is replay, I don't enjoy the game. And you imagine lying on your couch with instant replay, the thing zooming in, and how many of you watch cricket?
Can I say that I think it's important that we understand that we're talking about education and not just instruction. And I think there is a big difference between the two. Instruction is part of education, but education is a concept that goes well beyond instruction, and that invites, requires the use of the word experience. I think that online, in its totality, if it were, you know, those degrees that are offered totally online, the experiential element suffers, I would venture to say. In those blended schemes, if I were the architect of the scheme, I would probably use the online more for the imparting of skill, for the tangibles, frankly, for the things that employers, that are not terribly high on employers' lists, but nonetheless are necessary. The rest, what makes people employment ready, and I had to get it in, is the university experience with everything that means. And that's tied to education, which, as I said, goes beyond instruction. So I think, technically speaking, there probably isn't anything that online can't do, but I think that for an experience to rise to the worthiness of the word education, in situ still has a lot to offer, and the university experience in class, outside of class, with society, in society, whether that society be government, whether it be the private sector, that interaction, whatever, has an important role to play.
Very good, thank you. And so to link to that, what do you think therefore should be the role of an institution leader in this new world?
Oh boy, who's going to start with that?
Who wants to start?
Well, I would say the institution leader has to chart the course, obviously. I very much believe, as I think anyone who has studied organizations understands the importance of purpose. That purpose has to be reflected in a mission statement, and it's the leader's role to ensure that at the most micro level in the organization, things are going on and being decided consistent with the mission, as opposed to either being mission neutral or going against the mission. I think the future in education belongs to creativity. If I take what Sir Ken Robinson has to say seriously, and I do, that calls for transformation in this era of discontinuous change. That leader has to obviously be a catalyst for that change, and has to create an atmosphere, has to create the atmospherics, not only where the traditional life of the mind can prosper, but the non-traditional search for imagination, innovation, and creativity.
Very good.
There has to be a healthy tolerance, I think, for chaos as part of that. Not everybody and everything can be in a box with a label on it. And we have to thrive on the unpredictability of daily life, as opposed to being destroyed by it.
Excellent. James, how do you think the institutional leader needs to be a catalyst for change?
So I think that the biggest thing is to think of the advent of online learning not as a threat, but as an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to do things that we've already been talking about, which is to rethink what faculty should be doing in their classes, rethink where students should and can go for information, and rethink how online learning can be consistent with and enhance the mission of a school. I also think that it's important when thinking along these lines to always come back to the learner and to learning, and think about what do we know about how students learn best, and how can we use technology to enhance that. The last is, I think that this is a great opportunity for schools and universities to expand their mission, and this is, I think, in large part where edX comes in. So now universities, instead of simply reaching the few thousand students who might be on campus, they have the capacity to reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of students around the globe. And that is an enormous opportunity insofar as it's opening up the doors of universities and expanding their reach. And it's especially important in a school like mine that's a professional school. So we're in the business of educating educators, and one of the most important things we do is professional development. And we have a few thousand educators come to campus each year, but we're limited by space in terms of the number of educators we can reach. Well, with online courses and modules, we can reach tens of thousands of educators, which is not only consistent with our mission, but completely enhances it. So I really think the most important thing is the mindset, which is not to be afraid, but to think of this as a remarkable opportunity to transform the education that's occurring on campus and to expand your reach.
Very good. Anant, how does the mindset need to change of the institutional leader?
I think the timing in terms of the impact of an education leader in terms of transforming university has never been more important than now. In the past, with universities, we looked at how long the university has been around. And you know, we see great universities represented here, you know, American University of Dubai, you know, Harvard, Tsinghua, some of the great institutions of our land. Here, if you're a leader of any of these great institutions, the key mantra that you used to keep in mind was do no damage. These were great institutions, and as long as you left your tenure not having damaged the reputation, you did great. And frankly, we've heard of many stories of leaders that tried to do things that got voted out of office or whatever because they potentially risked the name of the university. But rarely was a leader there to project the university into the next level. So that's what the leadership was about in the past. But today, I believe times are different. Today, these are very turbulent times for universities, whether they like it or not. I really do believe that if leaders do not look to transform university based on cost pressures, based on quality pressures, based on technology pressures, I think there's a real danger that many universities will go into obscurity. By the same token, innovative leaders can really take the university and make it stay completely relevant and become even bigger in the future. So I believe at this particular point in time, many second and third tier universities with strong leadership have the opportunity to really propel themselves into the top tier. So whenever there's turbulence, innovative leaders and people that have courage and are willing to take risk will rapidly rise to the top. And so this is the time for great leadership.
Excellent.
Can I just say one thing about that, which I totally agree on the comment on second and third tier universities, and the accrediting bodies in the United States would agree that very often they find some of the most interesting and innovative work going on in universities that are classed second or third tier as opposed to those that are first tier. Obviously, their explanation would be that the first tier is resting on its laurels, slow to change, lots of turf protection, or what have you, where the second and third tier can be more porous and more open. And open to what? Open to doing things differently. Second and third tier, they have found, or I have found in my discussions with them, where they have said second and third tier doesn't feel as though they have a lot to lose, and so there's more of an environment of experimentation and more openness to just not necessarily have to respect the sacred cow.
Mm-hmm. So Ben, maybe I can ask you that. Do you feel that changed you in terms of expectations from an institutional leader from the do no damage to you need to innovate?
Sure. One day last October, we held our university global advisory committee meeting. The chairperson, Rubenstein, David Rubenstein, asked a question to one new member whose name is Jack Ma with Alibaba.com. And we just report the Tsinghua's online education reform plan. And David asked Jack, you are now famous as internet everything. What do you think about the Tsinghua plan for the online education in the future? Jack Ma played with his mobile phone, actually, and answered the question with that, I don't know what's the future of the education will be, but I don't think the university professors can provide the answer, the right answer. You go through too good education. You pass, you get degrees from Harvard, MIT, all the best universities. Jack, I didn't finish, community college. And I think the university leaders should learn more from, the industry players. Now, edX, the courses, the online courses are still very similar to the traditional courses. I think that's the problem. Apple Watch is too similar to the traditional watch. You have to be more crazy, more innovative. Maybe in the future course, this concept will be totally, disruptive, changed.
Very good. Thank you very much. And moving back to Anant, because we were talking about edX, so some of the criticism about MOOCs is that there's high participation rate but lower completion rate. So what do you think needs to happen so that we can unleash the full potential of MOOCs? And is it a little bit linked to the previous point, the importance of engaging with industry?
Sure. So first of all, you can look at it in two ways. The first one is many journalists have moaned about the low completion rates of MOOCs. So if you look at the total statistics of MOOCs, whether it's edX or other MOOC providers, the pass rate for courses tends to be about 6-7%. So it means of all the people that enroll, about 6 to 7 people complete, a percent complete. Now remember, these are free courses. You can click and jump into a course and start taking a course. However, if you look on edX, we also have verified certificates where a student has to commit a certain amount of money, put some skin in the game, $25 or $50, and put some skin in the game and sign up and commit to be a verified certificate earner. So if you look at the set of students that have committed to be verified certificate earners, the pass rate shoots up to a whopping 60%. Now 60% is a good number. 60% is higher than the average pass rate for all of the US universities taken as a whole. It's 55%, so it's higher. Now, that said, I think we can still try to do better with online education. If all online education did was match the pass rate of the average university in the US, heck, I'd commit harakiri.
Very good.
I think we can do a lot better.
There was a point we were discussing before around the new partnership you have with edX and Microsoft, and to provide credentials that are from industry as well. What do you think that's the future? Do you think that's part of the future?
I think one of the issues with the education system today is that you go take a complete education, and then employers complain that there are skills gaps. So what have we been doing in university? When we graduate students, and employers say, look, there are jobs, and there are graduates, but the graduates are not getting jobs because there are skills gaps. In India in particular, they graduate millions of engineering college students, and employers go and create their own academies. Wipro has Wipro University. Infosys has their own university, where students graduate, and then they spend 6 months re-graduating. So what are universities doing? The US is better, but even in the US, there's a whole subculture of boot camps that has come up.
Yes.
So you've all heard of companies like Hack Reactor, General Assembly. General Assembly has graduated 30,000 students. Hack Reactor graduates students and guarantees them jobs. Now these are 6-month boot camps that, much like finishing school in the hundreds of years ago. So here, students get a college degree, and then they go to one of these boot camps where they skill them up to go get a job. Now the question is, as a university, if I had my university hat on, I would love to see universities learn from that and say, we're missing some piece here. So why don't we do that piece within universities? Why don't we give students a degree, and then as part of that, give them some finishing that can also skill them up for jobs. In many cases, it is techniques on how to interview with each other. It's techniques on how to collaborate, project management, sales skills, communication skills, and also various other technical skills that relate to a job. So I think it's important that universities think about adding some of these skills into our curriculum as well.
I want to open up to the audience soon, so I'll just take a very quick word from James and from you.
Okay, so the only thing I would add is that I think Anant's exactly right about the importance of skin in the game and the importance of credentials for MOOC completion rates. I mean, I think signing up for a MOOC that's completely free, that doesn't result in a credential, is a little bit like deciding to go on a diet. A lot of people decide to go on a diet and a few weeks into it drop off. Less drop off if they sign up and pay for Weight Watchers or something similar to that. Less drop off if there's some reward at the end. The only other point I'd make is that we should be careful, I think, in thinking about higher education as preparing students for specific jobs, because we don't know what the jobs of 10 or 15 or 20 years are going to be. And I think that a traditional liberal arts education, which has come under fire to a certain extent in the US, is actually a great preparation for learning how to learn. That is, it provides a set of skills, a set of analytical skills, a set of communication skills that can be transferred from one context to another. And so I think that we should be thinking both about preparing students to be lifelong learners and the ways that they can, at the appropriate time, acquire the more specific skills that they need to have. And that could either be in a university or a college or a community college, or it could be in business. It could be in person or it could be online.
Very good.
No, I certainly agree with that, and as a professor of business whose first 2 degrees are in the liberal arts, through a master's degree in the liberal arts, I have to agree with that. But then so too do my business counterparts. My business counterparts, I know that you made reference to skill. Their problem is not so much an absence of the specific skills relevant to a business or a profession. It's the person and the breadth and depth of their education, their critical reasoning, their communication skills, their ability to solve problems, that the education at university level, whether it's general and has a vocational slant or has a vocational slant, simply doesn't seem to be satisfying those who employ our students. And I think, I believe vehemently that rather than universities kind of having an inbuilt rejection to what the professions bring to the party in terms of curricular content and delivery, so that it is eventually relevant to practice in those professions, I think we've got to get over that. If we don't get over that, we're going to lose support, we're going to lose relevance, and I have to say that we're not serving the needs of society, at least, you know, to a great extent. So there has to be a partnership. It has to be a greater partnership. And in the end, as I say, I think that someone who gets a BA in philosophy is potentially as effective a business person as someone who gets a BBA in business, because of the education and what it has done to the mind.
Excellent, very good. I'd like to open to the audience, the questions to the audience. Go ahead. Maybe please, if you can tell us your name and just read it just a question rather than comments.
Sure, Ben Shearer from Tohoku University of Japan. You touched upon this briefly, but I'm wondering what you think about the impact of online learning on non-elite universities. It seems to me that the elite universities will continue, and the non-elite universities will be subsumed into a better quality online delivery.
Anyone specifically you want to direct your question to in the other panel?
Just in general.
Okay, who wants to take it? One volunteer, because we want to have more questions.
I'm happy to take that. You know what's interesting is for every argument people give me for how online education will do away with a tier 3 university, I can give you an argument why online education will make the tier 3 university much more relevant. Right. So I'll give you one argument. Let's say I'm Anant Agarwal in a small town with a third-tier university next to me. I can pay $50,000 and go and get a great liberal arts education traveling around the world to some other place for 4 years. But instead, because of online learning, my neighborhood college can now stream in and use as a virtualized textbook Michael Sandel's course and other great courses on the campus, I'm going to say, hey, I'll pay $10,000, go to my neighborhood campus to get the campus experience and all the magical things that happen on campus. Why should I pay $50,000 and go to elite university far away? So I think online learning is like a rising tide that will lift all boats, including my neighborhood college.
Yes.
My name is Kabir Usman, Director General Center for Management Development, Nigeria. I've just heard what the speakers spoke about, the issue in terms of our graduates, are no longer, employable with relevant skills and so on. One of the fundamental problems is possibly, I'm not aware of any provost or vice chancellor or presidents that come from the private sector and become, a vice chancellor of a university and vice versa. There are not many of them, actually. And that doesn't happen. The second aspect, the emphasis is always, on teaching rather than on learning. And I'm glad that we are putting, learner at the forefront of things. And I think it is very important, for us, to remember that, the industries are not very much maybe talking to universities that they should do and vice versa. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. There was a question over there.
I'm Bob Hogg from the University of Warwick in the UK. I hear more and more institutions of higher education describe themselves as, or say they aspire to become a global university. What is a global university?
Who wants to tackle that one? What is a global university?
I'll start, and then I think maybe among the four of us we can get to a complete answer. I think part of a global university is who is on your campus and how far does your campus reach. So it's about who's there and then how far does your reach extend. In terms of who's there, I think a truly global university has students from all around the world, faculty from all around the world. And beyond that, I think part of the mission of the university is to prepare students to be global citizens. So teaching them about the world and about, you hear a lot about globalization, but really teaching students what that actually means in terms of economics, in terms of politics, in terms of social relations. And then I also think a global university is one that has a global reach in terms of where their students return to or go to, in terms of where their faculty are doing research, in terms of where their partnerships are, in terms of where their online courses are reaching. And in this respect, it's easy to see how putting courses online enables the globalization process, because suddenly you have, as part of your virtual campus anyway, students literally from around the world, and suddenly you have your faculty teaching in virtually places around the world.
One last question.
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm guessing many of you are familiar with the Minerva project.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on whether you'll see more universities started that are funded by the entrepreneurial kind of startup venture-backed community, and if so, whether that will be quite disruptive or not to the existing institutions, and if so, what form those new universities will take.
I'm pretty familiar with Minerva, and in fact, Ben Nelson and I have been on panels together. There are many venture-backed universities. Kaplan University is a venture-backed university. Phoenix University is a venture-backed university. So there are large numbers of venture-backed universities, so that's not new. I think the single key idea of Minerva is that there's applying this technique that I talked about earlier, unbundling, which is what are the kinds of things as a university do we want to focus on? And what they're saying is that, so they're very much a traditional university. They have professors, they have video-based synchronous classes. It's not truly online. But what they've done is they've unbundled and dispensed with a lot of the things that people find attractive in universities, in my opinion. So for example, they don't have athletics. They don't have an expensive swimming pool. They don't have healthcare. They don't have dormitories. So they've gotten rid of all the things that you might not consider research, or they've gotten into research as well. So it's just focused on teaching. And that's Minerva. And their hope is that they can bring tuition down to $10,000 by doing so. And I think it's interesting. I would call it a unbundled university. I think it's quite interesting.
Very good. I want to ask each one of you, we're running out of time, unfortunately. I want to ask each one of you to summarize in one thought the key messages to take away from here. So if you had to give one advice to someone, whether it's the teacher, the learner, the institutional leader, the government leaders, what would be that one advice that you would take away so that the learner can be taken to the, in terms of higher education, so that the learner can benefit?
Hi. My suggestion for the institutions' leaders is we have to be adaptive leader for the future learning, and we have to unlearn something we are very familiar with.
Very good. Anant?
My advice would also be for university leaders, particularly leaders of second and third and fourth tier universities. Be innovative. Here's your chance to be number one. Because those who are at number one, if they are not innovative, they may not stay there for too long. And so think about unbundling. Think about what you really, really value on your campus. Is it research? Is it teaching? Is it a specific vertical area that you focus on? I would say really focus on your strengths and be really innovative, and possibly dispense with some of the things that may not be all that important, and possibly get subscriptions to MOOC providers to fill in gaps that you don't have, and don't try to be all things to all people.
Very good. James?
Okay, so one line. It'll
Yes.
be a short line. I would say embrace disruption.
Very good.
I was going to say, don't fear change, embrace change, and make accountability, effectiveness, creativity, and measurement part of your daily vocabulary.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Valky Foundation. I would love to thank our panelists. Thank you for the audience today, and hope to see you next year in Dubai.
Thank you.